She fought the magnetic pull, a battle against an attraction so potent it threatened her meticulously ordered world. His presence alone felt like a forbidden current, weakening her iron resolve with every stolen glance. Hello, amazing viewers. I'm Morgan, your storyteller, and I hope this finds you well. Before we dive into this incredible journey, if you crave romance, real love, and the earth-shattering power of a connection that defies expectation, you're in the perfect place. Prepare for a soul-stirring, unforgettable love story that lingers long after the final word. Trust me, you won't want to miss a moment. It's worth every second. So, if you haven't yet, please subscribe and let's begin this unforgettable tale together. Chapter 1. The polished chrome doors of the private elevator slid shut, sealing Desiree Sinclair within a capsule of silent luxury. Her reflection stared back, immaculate bone-white suit jacket tailored to sharp perfection, the obsidian silk camisole beneath a slash of darkness against her deep brown skin. Not a strand escaped the severe chignon sculpted at her nape. Kohl-lined eyes, the color of rich, dark coffee, surveyed the image with detached appraisal. Control. It was the air she breathed, the pulse beneath the meticulously curated surface of the Sinclair Grand. The elevator hummed, a vibration felt more through the soles of her stilettos than heard, descending through the heart of her empire. The doors opened onto the main lobby, a cathedral to Art Deco opulence. Sunlight streamed through towering leaded windows, fracturing into rainbows on the geometric patterns of the black and white marble floor. The air hummed with the discreet murmur of wealth, the clink of fine china from the palm court, the rustle of a broadsheet newspaper, the low, professional tones of the concierge. Desiree stepped out. Her heels struck the marble with precise, echoing clicks that announced her presence like a drumbeat. Heads turned, not overtly, but with the subtle shift of attention reserved for a sovereign crossing her domain. She acknowledged no one, her gaze fixed on some invisible point ahead, a queen surveying her kingdom. The scent here was cool, polished stone, expensive floral arrangements, white lilies today, sharp and clean, the faintest whisper of lemon oil. She moved past the glittering reception desk, a monolith of onyx and brass, towards the quieter eastern wing. Her destination wasn't usual for this hour. Usually she'd be ascending to her penthouse eyrie, or sequestered in her minimalist fortress of an office on the 50th floor. Today a flicker on a surveillance monitor had snagged her attention, a persistent quiet anomaly in the ordered rhythm of the Sinclair Grand. The atmosphere shifted as she neared the entrance to the Athenaeum Library. The marble gave way to sound-absorbing parquet, the air cooling further, taking on a different weight. The sharp scent of lilies faded, replaced by something older, richer, the dry, sweet dust of centuries-old paper, the tang of leather bindings, the faint, comforting aroma of beeswax polish. The grand double doors stood open, revealing a cavernous space bathed in the soft, golden light of brass reading lamps. Towering mahogany bookshelves stretched towards a coffered ceiling painted a deep, celestial blue. Sunlight slanted through high, arched windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the stillness. Silence reigned here, thick and velvety, broken only by the occasional rustle of a page. Desiree paused in the doorway, a silhouette of power against the warm gloom. Her eyes scanned the vast room, instinctively cataloging the gleam of the polished wood railings, the precise alignment of the ladder leaning against a distant shelf, the undisturbed serenity. And then she found him, Andre Pierce. He was a slight figure, almost spectral against the backdrop of leather-bound giants. Late 20s, pale skin that seemed to hold its own light in the dimness, tousled dark hair falling over his forehead, as he bent over an open ledger at the central librarian's desk. His focus was absolute, absorbed in the intricate script before him. He wore a slightly too large oatmeal-colored sweater over a collared shirt, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, revealing surprisingly strong forearms dusted with fine dark hair. His movements were economical, graceful in their quietude. A fingertip traced a line on the page with a reverence that struck Desiree as profoundly alien. She watched, unseen, as he carefully closed the heavy ledger, his touch lingering on the worn leather cover. He turned then, perhaps sensing the shift in the air, the subtle displacement caused by her presence. His gaze swept the room, landing on her. Gray eyes, wide and clear as a winter sky, met hers. For a fraction of a second, pure unguarded surprise flickered across his face, followed by a swift, deep flush that bloomed across his high cheekbones and down his neck. He looked, startled, unprepared. like a creature of the stacks suddenly exposed to harsh daylight. He took a half step back, bumping against the sturdy oak desk. "Miss Sinclair," he breathed, his voice low, husky with disuse, yet unexpectedly resonant in the quiet. He straightened, attempting a semblance of professionalism that couldn't quite mask the tremor in his hands, as he smoothed his sweater. "I wasn't expecting anyone this early." Desiree stepped fully into the library, the sound of her heels now muffled by the thick Persian rug beneath the desk. "Good morning, Mr. Pierce." Her own voice was cool, polished, a perfect instrument of control. She gestured vaguely towards the towering shelves, merely ensuring the early shift is adequately covered. The Sinclair Grand prides itself on constant readiness. The lie felt smooth on her tongue, yet the intensity of his gaze, that startling vulnerability, sent an unwelcome ripple through her composure. She focused on a point just beyond his shoulder. "The 1892 acquisition logs, for the Venetian collection?" Andre blinked, then nodded quickly. "Yes," verifying some provenance details before the curator arrives. "It's fascinating," he added, a spark of unexpected enthusiasm momentarily overriding his shyness as he tapped the ledger. The meticulousness of the records from that era, almost artistic. He flushed again, as if embarrassed by his own outburst. "Artistic bureaucracy." Desiree arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, a ghost of something that wasn't quite amusement touching her lips. The banter was instinctive, a weapon in her arsenal, yet it felt strangely off-kilter aimed at this quiet man. An oxymoron, surely. He met her gaze again, a flicker of challenge in those clear gray depths beneath the shyness. "Not necessarily, Miss Sinclair. Precision can have its own beauty, like..." He hesitated, searching for an analogy, his eyes darting briefly to the elegant line of her suit jacket, the sharp angle of her shoulder. "Like the architecture here, form following function, yet achieving grandeur." Desiree felt an unexpected warmth bloom beneath her collar. His observation was astute, disarming. She tilted her head, studying him. "You see beauty in function, Mr. Pierce." He swallowed, the movement visible in the taut line of his throat. "I see value in things that serve their purpose well, with integrity." His gaze dropped to the ledger, his long fingers tracing the embossed Sinclair crest on its cover. "This hotel is a testament to that." The compliment, simple and genuine, landed with surprising weight. Desiree was accustomed to flattery, slick and calculated. This felt different, raw. She found herself wanting to needle him further, to see that flush deepen, to hear that quiet voice form more unexpected words. "Integrity is paramount," she agreed, her tone deliberately neutral, stepping slightly closer. The scent of him reached her now, not cologne, but clean cotton, the faint, dry sweetness of old paper, and something else, warm like sun on skin, though sometimes the sheer scale of function can be overwhelming. "Don't you find the quiet here a refuge?" He looked up, a small, almost shy smile touching his lips. "It's less refuge, Miss Sinclair, and more immersion, like diving into a deep, still pool." He gestured around at the towering shelves. "The world outside fades, it's just you and the voices captured here." He paused, color rising again, metaphorically speaking, of course. "Of course," Desiree murmured, her own voice lower than intended. The image he conjured, immersion, depth, resonated oddly within her. Her world was all surface tension, brilliant and impenetrable. His felt different, accessible in a way she couldn't define. She moved past him, ostensibly to examine a nearby shelf housing rare atlases. Her arm brushed lightly against the worn fabric of his sweater sleeve. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through her. She froze, her breath catching imperceptibly. Andre flinched as if scalded, pulling his arm back. "Apologies," he mumbled, staring fixedly at the floor. "No harm done," Desiree said smoothly, forcing her heartbeat to steady, turning to face a massive leather-bound volume. She reached for it, her hand closing over the gilded spine at the exact moment Andre, perhaps seeking to assist or simply retreat, reached for the same spot. His fingers, warm and slightly rough, brushed against the back of her hand. Time seemed to stutter. Desiree felt the contact like a brand. His skin was startlingly warm against hers, which felt suddenly chilled. He snatched his hand back as if burned, his breath hitching audibly. "I'm so sorry, Miss Sinclair. I didn't." "Fragile things require careful handling, Mr. Pierce," Desiree interrupted, her voice remarkably steady, despite the frantic drumming in her chest. She withdrew her hand slowly, deliberately not looking at him, focusing instead on the intricate gold tooling on the book's cover. The phantom warmth of his touch lingered. Some volumes are irreplaceable. The double entendre hung in the air, heavy and unacknowledged. Andre stood frozen, the flush now a deep crimson that reached the tips of his ears. He seemed to have stopped breathing. Yes, Miss Sinclair," he stammered. "Utmost care. Always." The silence stretched, thick with unspoken currents. Desiree could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the clean, slightly papery scent intensified by his proximity, and his obvious disquiet. It was intoxicating and terrifying. This was untenable. He was an employee, young, painfully shy, possessing an unsettling purity that felt like a reproach to the complex negotiations and calculated power plays that defined her existence. And she was overwhelmed by a brush of fingers, by gray eyes wide with a vulnerability that called to something buried deep within her fortress walls. "Carry on, Mr. Pierce," she stated, her voice regaining its customary cool distance. A shield slammed back into place. She turned on her heel, the movement sharp, decisive. "Ensure the Venetian logs are cross-referenced with the insurance appraisals by noon." She didn't wait for a response, walking swiftly back towards the library entrance, her heels suddenly loud again on the parquet, echoing in the profound silence she left behind. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The image of his flushed face, his startled eyes, the unexpected warmth of his skin, was seared onto her retinas. As she stepped back into the cooler, more sterile air of the corridor, the polished marble felt jarringly cold beneath her feet. The scent of lilies seemed cloying. The familiar hum of the hotel felt dissonant. A single traitorous thought echoed. Irreplaceable. Back in the Athenaeum, Andre Pierce remained rooted to the spot, his hand tingling where it had touched hers. He stared at the spot where she had stood, the air still seeming to vibrate with her presence. The faint trace of her perfume, something expensive, darkly floral with a hint of vanilla, the imprint of her power, the startling vulnerability he thought he'd glimpsed beneath the ice for just a moment. He slowly raised his hand, looking at the back of it as if it belonged to someone else. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in the quiet sanctuary of the library. He touched the leather cover of the ledger she'd almost touched, his fingers tracing the Sinclair crest once more. Fragile things, she'd said. He had never felt more fragile, or more strangely alive, than in the wake of Desiree Sinclair's impossible, electrifying nearness. The deep, still pool of his world had been violently disturbed, and he had no idea how to find calm water again. He picked up a fallen index card, his hands trembling slightly, the neat script blurring before his eyes. The silence of the library was no longer a refuge. It was charged, waiting, filled with the phantom echo of stiletto heels, and the impossible scent of power and vanilla. Chapter 2. The polished chrome elevator felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. Desiree leaned against the cool metal wall, closing her eyes against the relentless glare of the overhead lights. Behind her lids the image persisted, Andre Pierce's wide, startled gray eyes, the deep flush staining his pale skin, the startling warmth of his fingers brushing hers. Irreplaceable, the word echoed, a taunt. She exhaled sharply, a sound unnervingly loud in the enclosed space. Control, she needed to reassert it. He was an employee, a librarian, a quiet, unassuming presence in the meticulously ordered ecosystem of the Sinclair Grand. His effect on her was an anomaly, a glitch. It required correction through distance and discipline. Stepping into her penthouse foyer was like stepping into a vacuum. The air, filtered and scentless, offered no distraction. The vast expanse of floor-to-ceiling windows presented the city sprawled below, glittering and indifferent. She walked to the window, the city lights reflecting sharp pinpoints in her dark eyes. Below, the hotel pulsed with its usual nocturnal rhythm, discreet comings and goings, the soft glow from occupied suites, normalcy, order. She traced a cold fingertip down the glass, trying to banish the phantom sensation of his touch, the remembered scent of old paper and clean cotton that seemed to cling to her skin. Ridiculous. She poured a measure of expensive single malt, the amber liquid catching the light, the sharp, smoky aroma a familiar anchor. She took a sip, the burn a welcome counterpoint to the unsettling warmth simmering low in her belly. Distance proved a phantom strategy. Andre Pierce, once invisible, now seemed to occupy the very air of the Sinclair Grand. Desiree found her path inexplicably drawn towards the Athenaeum's hushed sanctuary. It wasn't conscious, she told herself. It was efficiency. Oversight. Ensuring the new asset was performing adequately. Yet each visit felt like stepping into charged air. One late afternoon, the sun slanted long and golden through the high library windows, painting stripes of light across the dark wood floor. Desiree stood near the astronomy section, ostensibly examining a celestial atlas. Andre was perched high on the rolling ladder, carefully reshelving volumes on the top tier. She watched, unnoticed she thought, as he stretched, the worn fabric of his sweater pulling taut across surprisingly defined shoulders, the line of his neck exposed, pale vulnerable skin disappearing into the dark collar. A tendon flexed as he slid a heavy tome into place. Desiree's breath hitched, the atlas in her hands felt suddenly heavy, the intricate constellations blurring. She forced her gaze downward, focusing on the swirling nebulas printed on the page, finding the Sinclair Grand's place in the cosmos. Miss Sinclair. His voice, soft yet resonant in the quiet, startled her. He had descended the ladder silently, standing a respectful distance away, a faint, hesitant smile playing on his lips. Dust motes danced in the sunbeam beside him, haloing his tousled dark hair. Desiree snapped the atlas shut with a soft thud. Merely appreciating the precision of the cartography, Mr. Pierce, a reminder that even the vastness of space can be mapped and understood. Her tone was cool, aiming for detachment, but it felt brittle even to her own ears. He stepped closer, drawn by the book, his gray eyes alight with genuine interest. Johannes Hevelius, he murmured, reaching out but stopping just short of touching the cover. 17th century. His star charts were revolutionary for their time. He insisted on accuracy, even building his own observatory. His fingertip hovered near the embossed title. Precision again, finding order in the chaos. Desiree tilted her head, studying him. The fading sunlight caught the flecks of lighter gray in his eyes. You admire precision, don't you? He countered gently, meeting her gaze. It's the foundation of everything here, isn't it? The timing of the turn-down service, the exact temperature of the pool. He paused, a faint blush creeping up his neck, the angle of a perfectly folded napkin. It's a kind of artistry. Control, Mr. Pierce, she corrected, her voice low. Precision is merely the tool, control is the objective. She held the atlas out towards him. Hevelius mapped the stars, but he couldn't control their movements. Some forces resist containment. He took the book, his fingers brushing hers again, a fleeting electric contact that sent a jolt through them both. He held the volume carefully, his gaze locked with hers. Perhaps, he said softly, some forces aren't meant to be contained. Perhaps they're meant to be navigated. He flushed deeper, looking down at the atlas. Like uncharted constellations, the air thickened, the scent of old paper and leather seemed to intensify, mingling with the clean warmth radiating from him. Desiree felt the familiar, treacherous warmth pool low in her abdomen. Navigated. The word shimmered with dangerous possibility. Navigation requires charts, Mr. Pierce, she said, her voice huskier than intended. And sometimes the charts are wrong. She turned abruptly, the click of her heels sharp against the parquet as she walked away, leaving him standing in the sunbeam, the heavy atlas in his hands, the echo of her words and the ghost of her touch hanging in the charged silence. The encounters became landmines, scattered across her meticulously planned days. Passing him in the hushed corridor outside the library, the air between them crackling with unspoken awareness. Him delivering a report to her office, his knuckles white where he gripped the folder, his gaze lowered yet intensely present. The accidental nearness, as they both reached for the door handle of the rare books room, a shared intake of breath, a suspended moment, where the world narrowed to the scant inches separating them. The clean scent of his soap cutting through the usual aroma of her expensive perfume and polished wood. Desiree would retreat behind a mask of icy professionalism, her directives crisp, her gaze distant. Andre would shrink, stammer, flush crimson, yet a new element flickered beneath the shyness, a quiet watchfulness, a resilience that hadn't been there before. Her torment was a constant gnawing companion. Fantasies, vivid and unbidden, invaded her disciplined mind. The imagined softness of his skin beneath her fingertips, the vulnerability in his eyes, yielding not to fear, but to a dawning intense desire, the curve of his mouth, the strength in his surprisingly capable hands. She would be reviewing financial projections, and the numbers would blur, replaced by the image of him bent over a manuscript, the vulnerable nape of his neck. During tense board meetings, the drone of voices would fade, replaced by the memory of his low, resonant tone, saying uncharted constellations. The warmth became a constant ache, a hum beneath her skin that terrified her with its persistence. Self-loathing followed, sharp, corrosive. He's young, he's untouched, he's your employee, you'll consume him, shatter him. It's unconscionable. She took punishingly cold showers, the water like needles on her suddenly hypersensitive skin. She wore her most severe suits, the structured fabric feeling like armor, the weight of her signature pearls a constant reminder of her position, her legacy, a collar of responsibility. Her control manifested as a glacial chill in his presence, a shield that seemed only to intensify the magnetic pull between them, making every accidental touch, every shared glance, feel like a seismic event. Andre's longing was quieter, a deep resonant chord vibrating beneath his shy exterior. He observed Desiree Sinclair, the effortless power in her stride, the sharp intelligence in her dark eyes, the breathtaking beauty that seemed carved from night and marble. She was a distant star, brilliant and unattainable, yet he felt the weight of her gaze like a physical touch, both terrifying and exhilarating. His virginity, once a simple fact of his quiet life, became a tangible presence, a mixture of profound shyness and an aching unformed yearning that focused entirely, bewilderingly, on her. He couldn't speak it, couldn't act on it in any overt way, but he found subtle channels. Desiree began to find small, inexplicable alterations in her environment. In her penthouse, a single breathtakingly rare cobalt blue orchid appeared on the obsidian surface of her coffee table one morning, its exotic fragrance a delicate counterpoint to the sterile air. No note, just the impossible bloom, vibrant against the monochrome. In her office, the stack of reports she needed for the morning was arranged not just neatly, but perfectly aligned, the corners sharper than her assistant ever managed. One afternoon, entering the Athenaeum, she found her preferred reading chair by the west window, subtly repositioned to catch the last of the afternoon sun, a pristine linen handkerchief, clearly not hotel issue, folded neatly on the side table beside a carafe of chilled water. It was a silent language, a devotion expressed in acts of quiet service and impossible beauty. He was watching her, learning her rhythms, her unspoken preferences. She never acknowledged these gifts aloud, but each one struck her with the force of a physical blow, a fissure cracking the ice of her resolve. She found herself touching the velvety petal of the orchid, her fingertip lingering, a traitorous warmth spreading through her chest. One particularly tense Wednesday, Desiree retreated to the Athenaeum, seeking its usual calming silence. She found Andre meticulously cataloging a new acquisition, a collection of fragile, hand-illuminated manuscripts. He was wearing thin cotton gloves, handling the ancient pages with a reverence that bordered on the sacred. She stood in the shadows, watching the focused intensity on his face, the way his lips moved slightly as he deciphered the ornate script. The air was thick with the scent of vellum and aged ink. "Beautiful, aren't they?" she said quietly, stepping into the pool of light cast by his desk lamp. The patience it must have taken, the devotion. He started slightly, then looked up, his gray eyes wide. "Miss Sinclair, yes, it's humbling, to hold something so old, so carefully made." He carefully turned a page, revealing a stunning illustration of a sapphire blue bird, amidst gold leaf vines. "The lapis lazuli used here, it's still so vivid, centuries haven't dimmed it." "Some things retain their power," Desiree murmured, leaning closer to see the detail. Her shoulder brushed his arm. She felt the solid warmth of him through the thin layers of their clothes, smelled the faint clean scent of his skin beneath the vellum aroma. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Despite time, despite handling, Andre froze, his gaze fixed on the illuminated bird, his breathing shallow. The air between them vibrated. He slowly turned his head to look at her. The shyness was still there, but beneath it, a startling intensity burned. "Some things are meant to be seen," he whispered, his voice rough. "Meant to be appreciated, kept safe." His gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then snapped back to her eyes, filled with a raw, unguarded longing that stole her breath. Desiree felt the ground tilt, the carefully constructed walls trembled, the ache inside her flared into a white-hot need. She wanted to close the minuscule distance, to taste the words on his lips, to feel if his skin was as warm as it seemed. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, charged with the unsaid. It was Andre who broke first, looking down, his flush deepening. The pigments, he stammered, focusing fiercely on the manuscript, his gloved finger tracing the edge of the blue bird. They used ground gemstones, incredible resilience. The moment shattered, leaving Desiree trembling internally. She straightened, putting precious inches between them, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the desk. Resilience is a valuable quality, Mr. Pierce, she managed, her voice tight. Ensure these are stored in the climate-controlled vault before you leave. She turned and walked away, her legs feeling unsteady. The image of his burning gaze, and the impossible blue of the illuminated bird, seared into her mind. Kept safe. The words echoed, a plea or a promise, she couldn't tell. The tension became a living thing, a third presence, inhabiting the Sinclair Grand. Desiree moved through her days like a tightly wound spring, her senses hyper-alert, attuned to the possibility of encountering him. The polished surfaces of the hotel seemed to reflect her inner fractures. Her sleep grew fitful, haunted by fragmented dreams, tangled limbs and silk sheets, the scent of paper and vanilla, gray eyes holding hers with devastating intimacy. She snapped at her impeccably efficient assistant over a minor scheduling error, an unprecedented lapse. She found herself standing at her penthouse window late at night, watching the city lights blur, her reflection in the glass looking strained, haunted. The control that defined her was slipping, grain by grain, eroded by a force as quiet and persistent as falling snow. Outside, the weather mirrored her inner turmoil. The bright, crisp autumn days gave way to a brooding heaviness. Thick, slate-gray clouds gathered, pressing down on the city like a lid. The air grew still and unnaturally warm, thick, with the promise of a storm. The Sinclair Grand, usually a bastion of climate-controlled perfection, felt stifling. Desiree felt it in her bones, a restless energy, a pressure building that demanded release. She paced her penthouse, the spacious rooms feeling claustrophobic. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder, a low growl from the horizon. She poured another whiskey, but the burn offered no comfort, only amplified the restless heat within her. Her thoughts inevitably turned to the library, to him, Andre Pierce, alone in that vast shadowed space with only the storm gathering outside. The image was vivid, unbearable, him silhouetted against the towering windows, the first flashes of lightning illuminating his solitary figure, vulnerable amidst the ancient knowledge. The deep pool he'd described, now churned by the approaching tempest, her carefully constructed defenses, already fractured by stolen glances and silent gifts, felt paper-thin against the onslaught of the storm, and the relentless pull of her own desire. The pressure inside her chest, built to an agonizing peak, the need to see him, to be near him in that charged, storm-lit space, became a physical compulsion, stronger than reason, stronger than duty, stronger than fear. The low growl of thunder seemed to resonate within her own body. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one raging within. Resolve, honed over decades, finally began to splinter. The deep, still pool of her control was about to be violently, irrevocably disturbed. She set the untouched whiskey down, with a sharp click, her decision made in the electric silence, before the deluge. She moved towards the private elevator, not as the sovereign of her domain, but as a woman drawn by an irresistible, terrifying tide. Chapter 3. The oppressive stillness within the penthouse had become a physical weight. Desiree stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, the glittering cityscape below rendered mute by the thick, slate-gray clouds pressing down like a suffocating blanket. The air, despite the Sinclair Grand's impeccable climate control, felt thick, warm, and unnaturally still, carrying the metallic tang of ozone. The storm's breath held in anticipation. Distant thunder rumbled, a low, discontented growl from the belly of the sky, vibrating through the reinforced glass beneath her palm. It echoed the relentless thrum deep within her own body, a resonance she could no longer ignore, no longer rationalize away. The image was seared into her mind, clearer than any financial report. Andre Pierce, alone in the vast shadowed cavern of the Athenaeum, vulnerable, illuminated only by the library's failing emergency lamps and the sporadic violent flashes of lightning that would soon tear the sky apart. The deep, still pool he'd described, about to be churned into chaos. Her carefully constructed defenses, already fractured by months of stolen glances, accidental touches, and impossible blue orchids, felt like ancient parchment crumbling under the mounting pressure. The ache, the need, had crystallized into a single terrifying imperative: go to him. Reason screamed its objections: protocol, propriety, the unbridgeable chasm of position, the potential ruin, for him, for her, for the legacy she guarded. But the storm outside, mirroring the tempest within, drowned it out. The next rumble of thunder was closer, sharper, shaking the very air. It wasn't a warning, it was a summons. Desiree turned from the window, the reflection in the glass, showing not the controlled CE, but a woman stripped bare by desire, her dark eyes wide and haunted. She didn't grab a coat, she didn't call security, she simply walked towards the private elevator, her bare feet silent on the cool marble, a queen abandoning her throne for the shadows below. The descent was an eternity compressed into seconds. The elevator's hum felt alien, intrusive. When the doors slid open onto the deserted main lobby, the atmosphere had shifted profoundly. The usual discreet murmur was gone, replaced by an eerie, waiting silence. The grand chandeliers flickered ominously, their brilliance dimmed. Staff moved with hushed urgency, securing furniture, their faces tense. The scent of polished stone was overlaid with dampness. The ozone smell stronger here, mixed with the faint damp wool odor of hastily donned uniforms. Desiree moved like a ghost through the cavernous space, her bare feet soundless on the now cool marble, drawn by an invisible thread towards the eastern wing, towards the library. The corridor leading to the Athenaeum felt colder, darker. The emergency lighting cast long, distorted shadows that leaped and danced with each flicker. The heavy scent of old paper and leather seeped from beneath the library doors, intensified by the damp, charged air. She paused, her hand hovering over the brass handle. For a heartbeat, the old control surged. Turn back. This is madness. Then, a deafening crack of thunder split the sky directly overhead, shaking the building, plunging the corridor into near-total darkness for a terrifying second before the emergency lights flared back, weaker than before. The decision was made. She pushed the door open. The Athenaeum was transformed. Gone was the warm golden sanctuary. It was a landscape of shadow and fractured light. The towering windows were opaque black mirrors streaked with rivulets of rain, reflecting the weak, intermittent glow of the battery-powered emergency lamps placed sporadically around the vast space. Their light created small, desperate islands of visibility in a sea of ink. The air hummed with the storm's fury, the drumming rain, the howl of wind straining against the ancient glass, the deep, percussive groans of the building itself. It smelled of wet stone, damp wool, ozone, and beneath it all, the comforting, persistent scent of centuries-old knowledge. He stood near one of the central reading tables, a lone figure illuminated by the beam of a heavy brass flashlight he held. He wasn't facing the door, he was staring out at the blackened window, his profile stark against the rain-streaked glass, caught mid-flash by a brilliant fork of lightning that momentarily bleached the room white. He wore the same oatmeal sweater, sleeves pushed up, his dark hair tousled. In his other hand, he held a thick leather-bound volume clutched to his chest like a shield. The beam of his flashlight trembled slightly. He looked achingly young, impossibly vulnerable, yet there was a stillness about him, a quiet focus amidst the chaos, that was profoundly compelling. Desiree stepped inside, the heavy door sighing shut behind her with a soft final click. The sound, barely audible over the storm, made him start violently. He whirled around, the flashlight beam swinging wildly before settling on her, blinding her momentarily. She raised a hand, not in command, but instinctively shielding her eyes. "Miss Sinclair," his voice was rough, laced with shock, and the residue of fear. The beam lowered, illuminating the floor between them, catching the dust motes swirling in the agitated air. "What? What are you doing here? It's not safe." The power. The sight of him, illuminated in the stark, unforgiving beam, sent a fresh wave of heat crashing through her. The controlled facade she'd worn for months felt like it was peeling away, layer by layer, under the pressure of the storm and the raw intensity of his presence. "Safety," she echoed, her voice sounding strange to her own ears, lower, stripped of its usual polish. "A relative concept tonight, Mr. Pierce." She took a step forward, then another, moving into the circle of light cast by his flashlight. The beam caught the dampness clinging to her silk pajama pants, the stark white of her tailored shirt untucked, her bare feet pale against the dark wood floor. Her hair, usually severely contained, had loosened in the penthouse's tension, a few dark tendrils framing her face. She knew she looked utterly unlike the CEO of the Sinclair Grand. She felt utterly unlike her. He stared, his gray eyes wide, reflecting the flashlight's glow, flickering with confusion and something else, a dawning incredulous recognition. His gaze swept over her dishevelment, lingering for a heartbeat on the exposed line of her throat, the curve of her bare foot. He swallowed hard, the sound audible over the rain. "You shouldn't be down here," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper now, lacking conviction. "The generators, they're unstable. The storm is everywhere, Andre," she said quietly, deliberately using his first name for the first time. The name felt like a key turning in a long locked door. She took another step, closing the distance. The scent of him, clean cotton, old paper, and the faint warm scent of his skin, washed over her. More potent than any perfume. The flashlight beam wavered in his grip. Is there safety in ignorance, in pretending the thunder isn't shaking the foundations? He flinched slightly at her proximity, at the raw intimacy in her tone, but he didn't retreat. His knuckles were white where he gripped the book and the flashlight. "Some foundations are meant to withstand storms," he murmured, his gaze locked on hers. The shyness was still there, warring with a startling intensity. The lightning flashed again, illuminating the stark planes of his face, the vulnerability in his eyes, yielding to something deeper, hotter. "Some aren't built for the force. Perhaps they need to be tested," Desiree countered, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. She was close enough now to feel the heat radiating from him, to see the rapid pulse beating at the base of his throat. The air crackled, charged not just with the storm's electricity, but with the unbearable tension between them. She reached out, not to take the book or the flashlight, but towards his face. Her fingertips, chilled from the marble corridors, brushed the sharp line of his jaw. He inhaled sharply, a ragged gasp that was swallowed by the next roar of thunder. He flinched, but then, incredibly, leaned into the touch, his eyes closing for a fleeting second. A shudder ran through him, powerful enough for her to feel it beneath her fingertips. When his eyes opened, the gray was dark, storm-tossed, filled with a raw, unguarded yearning that stole her breath. "Desiree," he breathed, her name a prayer, a surrender, on his lips. That single word, spoken with such desperate longing, shattered the last vestiges of her control. The dam broke, the carefully constructed walls crumbled into dust. Reason, duty, fear, they were swept away in the flood of pure undeniable need. Her other hand rose, cupping his face, her thumb tracing the high curve of his cheekbone. His skin was warm, impossibly soft. The flashlight clattered to the floor, rolling away, its beam slicing erratically across the towering bookshelves, plunging them into near darkness, illuminated only by the erratic flashes of lightning. "No more thinking," she whispered, the command ragged directed as much at herself as at him. "No more control." She closed the infinitesimal distance between them. The kiss wasn't gentle, it was a collision, a desperate meeting of lips starved for this contact. Hers were cool, tasting faintly of expensive mint. His were warm, soft, yielding at first, then parting with a low moan that vibrated against her mouth. The shock of it, the reality, the heat, the sheer rightness, was electric, more potent than any lightning strike. His arms came around her, tentative at first, then tightening, pulling her hard against him. The heavy book tumbled forgotten from his grasp, hitting the floor with a soft thud. She felt the solid wall of his chest, the rapid thudding of his heart against hers, the surprising strength in his embrace. His hands moved, trembling, one tangling in the hair at her nape, sending shivers down her spine, the other splaying possessively against the small of her back, pressing her closer. The kiss deepened, a silent, frantic conversation. Tongues met, explored, tasting, claiming. Desiree's hands slid from his face, down the strong column of his neck, over the planes of his shoulders, feeling the hard muscle beneath the soft wool. She tugged at his sweater, pushing it off his shoulders. He broke the kiss for a desperate second, pulling it over his head, tossing it aside. His collared shirt followed, buttons giving way under her impatient fingers. The sight of him in the flickering light, pale skin stretched over lean muscle, dusted with fine dark hair, the vulnerable hollow at the base of his throat, stole her breath. He was beautiful in his earnestness, his untouched masculinity. His hands were on her now, trembling but determined. He fumbled with the buttons of her silk shirt, his knuckles brushing the swell of her breast through the thin fabric, making her gasp. He paused, looking at her, his eyes dark pools of desire and hesitant awe. "Desiree," he breathed again, the name a question, a plea. "Don't stop," she commanded, her voice thick with need. She helped him, shrugging the shirt off her shoulders, letting it pool on the floor. The cool air hit her skin, but it was nothing compared to the heat of his gaze roaming over her lace-clad breasts, the curve of her waist. His touch followed, hesitant at first, tracing the line of her collarbone, the swell of her hip, then bolder, his palm sliding up her ribcage to cup her breast through the lace. A low groan escaped him, a sound of pure wonder and desperate want. She arched into his touch, her own hands exploring the taut planes of his stomach, the defined ridges of muscle, sliding lower to the waistband of his trousers. Clothing became an unbearable barrier. Trousers, pajama pants, the whisper of silk underwear, all discarded in a frantic silent tangle, lost in the shadows near the forgotten flashlight beam. The storm raged outside, wind howling, rain lashing the windows, thunder shaking the world, but inside their small illuminated circle, there was only skin on skin, breath mingling, the slick sounds of exploration and mounting urgency. Desiree guided him, her hand trembling slightly as she touched him, feeling the hard length of his arousal, the smooth, heated skin. He gasped, burying his face in the curve of her neck, his breath hot and ragged against her skin. He stammered, trembling violently. I know, she murmured, pressing a kiss to his temple, tasting the salt on his skin. "Let me." The vulnerability in his admission, the raw trust, shattered her completely. This wasn't conquest, it was mutual surrender. She guided him to the edge of the sturdy oak reading table, clearing a space with a sweep of her arm, sending papers fluttering to the floor like startled birds. She pulled him down onto the cool wood surface, following him, straddling his hips. The contrast was breathtaking, her smooth, deep brown skin against his pale freckled plains, illuminated in the strobing light of the storm. She looked down into his face, his gray eyes wide, filled with a mixture of fear, awe, and overwhelming desire focused solely on her. She took him inside her, slowly, watching his face, his breath hitched, a sharp gasp of pain, an intense pleasure, his eyes squeezing shut for a second before flying open, locking onto hers with startling intensity. His hands gripped her hips, not guiding, but holding on, anchoring himself as she began to move. It was tight, almost unbearably intimate. She moved with deliberate slowness at first, feeling every inch of him, the profound connection stealing her breath. His gaze never left her face, filled with a devotion, a focus that was more intimate than any touch. He whispered her name, a broken litany against the storm's roar. "Desiree, oh God, Desiree," as his hips began to move tentatively beneath her, finding a rhythm as ancient as the storm outside. The pace built, a rising crescendo mirroring the thunder outside, the slick slide of skin on skin, the desperate catch of breaths, the low moans swallowed by the howling wind. These were the only sounds in their world. Desiree lost herself in the sensation, in the feel of him filling her, in the intense focus of his gaze, in the building pressure coiling deep within her. She leaned down, capturing his mouth again in a fierce, possessive kiss, her hands braced on his chest, feeling the frantic hammering of his heart. His hands moved from her hips, sliding up her back, tangling in her hair, pulling her closer, deeper. His movements became less hesitant, more urgent, driven by a need that matched her own. The climax, when it came, wasn't a singular explosion, but a shattering wave that crashed over them both, relentless and all-consuming. It tore through Desiree with the force of the lightning splitting the sky, a white-hot release that arched her back, a cry torn from her throat, lost in the thunder's answering roar. Andre followed instantly, his body locking beneath her, a guttural groan ripped from deep within his chest, his hands clutching her desperately, as he spilled into her, his eyes wide, fixed on hers, filled with stunned wonder and absolute surrender. They collapsed together onto the hard surface of the table, limbs tangled, slick with sweat, breathing in ragged unison. The storm still raged outside, but its fury felt distant now, irrelevant. The only reality was the solid warmth of him beneath her, the frantic drumming of his heart, gradually slowing against her ear, the feel of his hand trembling, as it stroked her damp hair. No words, only the shared breath, the slowing pulse, the profound, echoing silence that settled within them, even as the tempest continued to batter the windows. The world outside the circle of their tangled bodies, the scattered papers, and the faint beam of the forgotten flashlight, ceased to exist. They had navigated the storm, not around it, but through its furious, transformative heart. The carefully ordered world of the Sinclair Grand, and the lives of its owner and her librarian, had been irrevocably changed. The deep still pool was forever disturbed, replaced by the churning, vital currents of a connection forged in lightning and surrender. Chapter 4. The world returned in fragments. First, the hard, unyielding surface of the oak table beneath Desiree's cheek, then the solid warmth of Andre's chest rising and falling steadily beneath her. The frantic drumming of his heart had slowed to a deep, resonant thud she could feel echoing through her own bones. The storm's fury had lessened, the thunder now a distant grumble, the rain a steady rhythmic drumming on the library's high windows. The chaotic symphony was replaced by the profound, intimate silence of shared breath and the lingering electric hum in the air between their bodies. Desiree didn't move. She lay draped over him, skin slick with sweat, limbs tangled, the scent of their joining rain, ozone, old paper, clean male skin, and something uniquely them, thick and heady in the stillness. One of Andre's hands rested lightly on the curve of her bare hip, his thumb making slow, unconscious circles on her skin. The other was buried in her hair, his fingers tangled in the loosened dark strands at her nape. His breathing was deep even, but she could feel the slight tremor still running through him, aftershocks of the seismic release they'd shared. She lifted her head slowly, the movement stirring the heavy air. Andre's eyes were open, fixed on the coffered ceiling high above, illuminated erratically by the fading flashlight beam rolling lazily on the floor nearby. In the dim, fractured light, his gray eyes looked huge, dark, filled with a stunned wonder that mirrored the tempest within her own soul. He felt her movement and turned his head. Their gazes locked. No words, none were needed. The shared experience hung between them, vast and unspoken. The Ice Queen shattered, the shy virgin initiated, the fortress breached, the deep pool forever disturbed. His lips, slightly swollen, parted as if to speak, but no sound emerged. Instead, a slow, tentative smile touched his mouth, transforming his face, erasing the last vestiges of boyish uncertainty, revealing a quiet, dazed joy beneath. Desiree felt an answering warmth bloom in her chest, a terrifying, exhilarating vulnerability she hadn't known she could feel. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips, a touch infinitely gentler than their earlier desperation. He leaned into it, his eyes drifting closed for a moment, a soft sigh escaping him. The practicalities began to intrude. The cool air raised goosebumps on her exposed skin. The hard table was unforgiving. The scattered papers beneath them rustled with every slight movement. Desiree shifted, reluctantly beginning to extricate herself. Andre's arms tightened instinctively for a fleeting second before loosening, allowing her to sit up. The movement sent a cascade of loosened hair tumbling over her shoulder. She looked down at him, pale skin glowing faintly in the dim light, lean muscle relaxed, the evidence of their passion glistening on his stomach. He watched her, his gaze traveling over her with a new kind of ownership, a profound intimacy that made her breath catch. There was no shame in his look, only awe and a lingering, sated hunger. "We can't stay here," Desiree murmured, her voice husky, unfamiliar even to herself. She gestured vaguely at the table, the scattered books, the storm still visible through the windows. Andre pushed himself up onto his elbows, wincing slightly. "No," he agreed softly, his voice rough. His gaze swept the chaotic scene, their discarded clothes tangled near the flashlight, the heavy ledger lying open on the floor where it had fallen. He looked back at her, a faint flush rising on his cheeks, not of embarrassment, but of shared, overwhelming reality. "My quarters are closer, down in the staff annex, but it's basic." The idea of Andre's private space, his sanctuary within her domain, was intensely alluring. "Basic sounds perfect," Desiree said, surprising herself. She slid off the table, her bare feet hitting the cool wood floor. The movement made her acutely aware of her nakedness, the lingering tenderness between her thighs, the unfamiliar sense of being utterly exposed, yet strangely unafraid. She reached for her discarded silk shirt, pulling it on, the the cool fabric a stark contrast to her heated skin. She didn't bother buttoning it. André scrambled off the table, moving with a new unself-conscious grace. He pulled on his trousers, then hesitated, looking at his sweater and shirt lying crumpled. He picked up the sweater, holding it out to her. "It's warmer," he offered simply. Desiree looked at the worn oatmeal wool, then back at him. A flicker of the old cool amusement touched her lips. "Afraid I'll catch cold, Mr. Pierce." The formality felt strange now, almost playful. He met her gaze, a spark of answering warmth in his gray eyes. "Merely ensuring the asset is protected, Miss Sinclair." The banter, laced with the memory of their earlier encounter, and the new intimacy, sent a fresh thrill through her. She took the sweater, pulling it over her head. It was soft, smelling overwhelmingly of him. Clean cotton, paper, and that underlying warmth. It drowned her frame, the sleeves covering her hands, the hem reaching mid-thigh. She felt absurd, she felt utterly grounded. He pulled on his own shirt, leaving it unbuttoned, then retrieved the still glowing flashlight. He held out his free hand. Desiree looked at it for a heartbeat, then placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, sure. The simple contact was a shockwave, a reaffirmation of the connection forged in the storm. He led her silently through the shadowed library, past the towering silent sentinels of books, towards a discreet door near the back that Desiree knew led to the lower service levels. The descent was a journey into a different world. Gone was the opulent marble and polished wood. The stairs were plain concrete, the walls painted a utilitarian beige, the air cooler, carrying the faint hum of machinery and the scent of laundry soap and floor polish. André moved with quiet confidence, his hand firm around hers. They encountered no one. The staff annex corridors were deserted at this hour, especially during the storm's aftermath. He stopped before an unmarked door, fumbling in his pocket for a key. His room was indeed basic, small, neat, dominated by a single bed covered with a plain blue duvet. A simple wooden desk held a stack of books and a reading lamp. A small armchair sat in one corner. The only personal touch was a framed print of a star chart on one wall. It was monastic, and yet it felt instantly like a sanctuary, a world away from the echoing grandeur of her penthouse or the charged history of the library. André closed the door behind them, the click echoing softly in the small space. He leaned the flashlight against the wall, its beam illuminating the floor. The sudden intimacy of the enclosed space, the narrow bed, was overwhelming. They stood facing each other, the air thick with the memory of what had happened, and the uncertain territory of what came next. André reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, tucking it gently behind her ear. The touch was tender, exploratory, sending shivers down her spine. "You're here," he whispered, disbelief and wonder warring in his voice. "Where else would I be?" Desiree murmured, stepping closer, drawn by the magnetic pull that seemed even stronger now. She placed her hands flat on his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath the thin cotton of his shirt. After navigating uncharted constellations, a slow, genuine smile spread across his face, lighting his gray eyes. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "The charts were definitely wrong," he breathed, his lips brushing hers in a whisper of a kiss. "The reality," he shook his head slightly, unable to find words, and kissed her again, deeply, but with a new tenderness, a slow exploration that spoke of awe and lingering discovery. Desiree melted into it, her arms sliding around his neck, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, slower than before, infused with a profound sense of belonging that was entirely new. They didn't make it to the bed immediately. They stood wrapped in each other, kissing with slow burning intensity, relearning the contours of mouths, the taste of skin rediscovered, without the frantic urgency of the storm. Desiree's fingers traced the line of his spine beneath his shirt, feeling the shift of muscle. André's hands roamed her back, down to the curve of her hips beneath the oversized sweater, his touch worshipful. The simmering heat returned, not the desperate conflagration of before, but a deep, steady burn. Eventually, they moved to the narrow bed. It was a tight fit. They shed the minimal clothing again, this time with deliberate slowness, a shared reverence. The intimacy was different here, in his small room, quieter, deeper. There was exploration, the sensitive hollow behind his knee, the way her breath hitched when he traced the shell of her ear with his tongue, the shared laughter when knees bumped in the confined space. When he entered her this time, it was slow, deliberate, a deep joining that felt less like taking and more like coming home. They moved together in a rhythm born of shared discovery, the world narrowing to the small bed, the sound of their mingled breaths, the feel of skin on skin. The climax, when it came, was a deep resonant wave of shared pleasure, a profound sigh rather than a shattered cry, leaving them entwined, breathing as one, in the quiet aftermath. Dawn was a pale gray suggestion at the small window when Desiree stirred. She was curled against André's chest, his arm draped heavily over her waist, his breathing deep and even. The storm had passed, leaving a washed clean silence. She lay perfectly still, absorbing the reality, the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her ear, the unfamiliar feeling of utter contentment, a profound peace that seeped into her bones. She traced the pattern of faint freckles across his shoulder with a feather-light touch. He stirred, his arm tightening around her, a soft murmur escaping his lips before he settled again. She didn't sleep. She watched the light slowly strengthen, painting the small room in shades of pearl and silver. She studied his face in repose, the relaxed line of his jaw, the dark lashes fanned against his cheek, the slight part of his lips. The shy librarian was gone. In his place lay a man transformed, marked by an experience that had stripped away layers of uncertainty, revealing a quiet strength and a depth of feeling that resonated with her own awakening. Irreplaceable, the word held new, undeniable meaning. Eventually, practicality nudged its way back in. She needed to return to her world before the hotel fully woke. Carefully, she extricated herself from his embrace. He murmured in protest but didn't wake. Desiree dressed silently in the faint light, her silk pajama pants, his sweater again, her shirt tucked loosely into the waistband. She left his clothes folded neatly on the chair. At the door she paused, looking back at him sleeping in the narrow bed, his face peaceful, one arm flung out where she had been. The sight squeezed her heart with a fierce protective tenderness. She slipped out, closing the door softly behind her. The journey back to the upper levels felt like traversing between worlds. The service stairs were still quiet. The main lobby, however, was already showing signs of life. Staff moved with purpose, clearing storm debris tracked in overnight, polishing the marble floor back to its usual blinding sheen. Desiree moved through it like a ghost in borrowed clothes, barefoot, her hair a wild tumble. She felt exposed, yet strangely invincible. She caught the discreet, startled glances, the quickly averted eyes. Let them look, let them wonder. The Ice Queen had thawed. Her penthouse felt jarringly vast and sterile after the intimacy of André's small room. The silence was oppressive. She walked to the window. The city sprawled below, washed clean by the rain, glittering under a newly risen sun. It looked different, sharper, brighter, filled with possibilities instead of obligations. She saw the Sinclair Grand, not just as an asset, but as a place that contained him. Her heart beat a steady unfamiliar rhythm, not the controlled tempo of power, but the vibrant pulse of life rediscovered. The days that followed were a delicate dance, a navigation of their transformed reality within the unchanging structure of the Sinclair Grand. Desiree moved through her duties with renewed focus, but the icy detachment was gone, replaced by a calm authority that felt warmer, more human. Her assistant, Elena, noticed the difference immediately. The slight softening around Desiree's eyes, the rare genuine smiles that sometimes touched her lips when she thought no one was looking. The unprecedented instance of Desiree asking after the well-being of the library staff, after the storm. André, too, was changed. The crushing shyness remained, but it was layered now with a quiet confidence, a new awareness in his gray eyes. He carried himself differently, not boldly, but with a subtle assurance. He performed his duties with meticulous care, but there was a new fluidity to his movements in the Athenaeum, a sense of belonging. He didn't seek her out, but their paths crossed with a frequency that felt orchestrated by something deeper than chance. One crisp autumn morning, Desiree entered the Athenaeum. André was at the central desk, repairing the spine of an ancient volume with delicate tools. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching the copper highlights in his dark hair. He looked up as she approached, a slow smile spreading across his face that lit his eyes, and sent a familiar warmth curling through her stomach. "Miss Sinclair," he greeted, his voice low, resonant, looking for another rare addition to disrupt. The banter was light, playful, laced with the shared memory of the storm, of the astronomy atlas. Desiree leaned against the desk, closer than propriety allowed. Perhaps I'm simply appreciating the precision of the restoration, Mr. Pierce, she countered, her gaze drifting over his hands as they worked with deft care, ensuring our valuable assets are properly maintained. She let her gaze lift to meet his, holding the spark of shared understanding. A faint blush touched his cheekbones, but he held her gaze, a flicker of heat in his gray eyes. Maintenance requires constant attention, he replied, his voice dropping slightly. Hands-on inspection is often necessary. He carefully set down his tool, his fingertip tracing the repaired leather. Wouldn't you agree? The double entendre hung in the air, warm and intimate. Desiree felt a responding flush of her own. Indeed, she murmured. She reached out, not touching the book, but letting her fingertips rest on the desk near his hand. Though some volumes reveal their true value only under close scrutiny. Her eyes locked with his, the unspoken words echoing between them. Like us, he smiled, a slow knowing curve of his lips. Some are worth the careful study, he agreed softly. He picked up a small velvet-wrapped package from the desk. This arrived for the collection this morning. A first edition Keats. I thought. He held it out to her, his gaze intent. You might appreciate it first, before it's catalogued, and locked away. Desiree took the package, her fingers brushing his. The contact, however brief, sent the now familiar jolt through her. She unwrapped the velvet. The small volume was exquisite, the binding worn but beautiful. She opened it carefully. Inside the front cover, written in a flowing hand, was an inscription. Beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. She traced the words, feeling the truth of them resonate deep within her transformed self. It's perfect, she breathed, looking up at him. The sunlight caught the flecks in his eyes, turning them the color of a storm-cleared sky. Irreplaceable. He held her gaze, the shared word a secret pact. Yes, he said simply. It is. Their bond was woven into the fabric of the Sinclair Grand in subtle, transformative ways. Desiree's penthouse still held its minimalist lines, but a single breathtaking cobalt blue orchid now bloomed permanently on the obsidian coffee table, its exotic fragrance a constant reminder. On her pristine desk, beside the latest financial reports, sat a small polished river stone Andre had found near the riverwalk and placed there one morning. Smooth, cool, grounding. Her office door, once always firmly shut, was now often slightly ajar. In the Athenaeum, Andre was sometimes found reading in a sunlit alcove, previously considered off-limits to staff during peak hours. A cup of Desiree's preferred expensive jasmine tea, steaming and fragrant, would often appear beside him, placed by unseen hands. They moved through the hotel like complementary forces. Her inherent power softened, his quietude strengthened. A shared glance across the bustling lobby could stop time, speaking volumes of longing and shared secrets. The brush of his hand, as he passed her a report in her office, sent a current through them both, a silent acknowledgement of the fire banked beneath the surface. One evening, Desiree stood on her penthouse balcony, wrapped in a silk robe, watching the city lights bloom against the twilight sky. The door slid open behind her. She didn't turn, but a smile touched her lips. Andre stepped out, joining her at the railing. He wore simple trousers and a sweater, his hair still damp from a shower. He didn't touch her, but stood close, his shoulder almost brushing hers. The silence between them was comfortable, charged with the profound intimacy they shared. Beautiful, he murmured, looking out at the glittering panorama. Desiree turned her head, studying his profile etched against the city lights. Yes, she agreed softly, her gaze lingering on the strong line of his jaw, the thoughtful curve of his mouth. It is. He turned to look at her then, his gray eyes reflecting the city's glow, filled with a depth of feeling that still had the power to steal her breath. Navigating uncharted territory, he asked, his voice a low rumble, echoing their earlier banter, but imbued with a new tender gravity. Desiree reached out, her hand covering his where it rested on the cold railing. His fingers turned, intertwining with hers instantly. Warm and strong. Every day, she replied, her voice thick with emotion she no longer feared to show. She looked back at the city, their world transformed, and finding the constellations more beautiful than the charts ever promised. They stood together in the gathering dusk, fingers intertwined, the lights of the Sinclair Grand, burning bright below them, no longer just a monument to control and legacy, but a testament to the quiet, transformative power of an unexpected, all-consuming love, navigated in silence, written in stolen glances, and forever reshaping the landscape of their lives. The deep, still pool was gone, replaced by the vibrant, ever-changing current of a bond forged in lightning, and tempered in the quiet dawn. The story wasn't finished, it was only just beginning, page by precious, uncharted page.